My name is Margaret Maggie Holloway. I was 46 years old, and I lived in Spokane, Washington, USA. Before everything changed, my life was painfully ordinary. I worked as a hospital billing coordinator, a job that kept me surrounded by sickness, numbers, and quiet suffering, but never close enough to touch it directly. I went home every evening, fed my dog, watched the news, and tried not to think too deeply about the world unraveling outside my window. I believed in God, quietly, carefully, without expectation. Faith for me was something private, something I kept tucked away so I wouldn't be disappointed if nothing happened. Yet deep inside, I felt something growing, a pressure, a heaviness. Not fear exactly, more like anticipation mixed with dread. I couldn't explain it, but my soul felt restless, as if it knew something my mind refused to accept. And then, I died. What Jesus showed me after my death was not comforting. It was not poetic. It was not symbolic. It was terrifyingly clear. 3 periods of darkness, 3 global blackouts, and millions of deaths. This is not a story meant to entertain you. It is a warning. Before you continue, please write this in the comments. Do you believe God still warns people before catastrophic events? Because what you are about to hear may change how you see the future and how prepared you truly are. In chapter 1, a normal life before the warning. Before my death, nothing about me screamed chosen messenger. I wasn't spiritual enough. I wasn't brave enough. I wasn't bold enough. Most days I felt invisible. My mornings were routine. Coffee, silence, a quick glance at the headlines that I pretended didn't bother me. Wars overseas, political tension, grid failures in distant countries, cyber attacks, rumors of temporary outages. I told myself the same thing everyone else did. It can't happen here. But my body didn't believe that lie. I felt tired all the time. Not physically, but spiritually. Like I was carrying a weight I couldn't set down. I would sit in traffic and suddenly feel an urge to pray, even though I didn't know what to say. At night, I had trouble sleeping. When I did sleep, the dreams came. Not symbolic dreams, literal ones. Cities without light, hospitals in chaos, people screaming in pitch-black streets. I would wake up with my heart racing, whispering, "It's just stress, it's just stress." But it wasn't. One night, I dreamed of standing in my kitchen while everything went dark. No hum of electricity, no phone signal, no sound at all. Outside, I heard screams echoing down the street. I woke up crying. The next morning, the power in my neighborhood went out for 2 hours. Coincidence, I told myself. At work, I noticed how dependent everything was on systems. Computers, servers, power grids, backup generators that everyone assumed would always work. One afternoon, a coworker joked, "If the power ever stayed off, we'd be dead in days." Everyone laughed. I didn't. Something inside me whispered, "They don't understand how close it is." But I ignored it, like most people do. I still planned vacations, still worried about bills, still argued with myself about faith. I would ask God quietly, almost sarcastically, "If you're real, why does it feel like the world is about to snap?" No answer came, just silence. And silence, I would soon learn, is often the final calm before something breaks. Please pause and write this in the comments. Have you ever felt a warning in your spirit that you couldn't explain logically? Because the next chapter is where everything changes. The day I died did not begin dramatically. It began normally, and that is what made it so dangerous. The spiritual unease and the signs I ignored. The unease didn't arrive all at once. It crept in slowly, like a draft through a door I didn't realize was open. At first, it was just a feeling, a subtle tension that followed me everywhere. I would be brushing my teeth, standing in line at the grocery store, or sitting alone on my couch, and suddenly my chest would feel tight, as if my body were bracing for something unseen. I tried to rationalize it. Stress, news overload, too much caffeine. But deep down, I knew those explanations were excuses. Something was wrong. I began noticing patterns. Not dramatic ones, Quiet, unsettling ones. Power flickers that lasted only seconds. Cell service dropping in places where it never had before. Emergency alerts testing systems more frequently, always labeled as routine. Routine. That word bothered me. One evening, while driving home from work, my radio cut out mid-song. Static filled the car, followed by silence. Then, for just a brief moment, a calm male voice spoke clearly through the speakers. Darkness comes quickly. I slammed the radio off, my hands shaking so badly I had to pull over. I sat there in my car, heart pounding, telling myself it had to be interference. A crossed signal, a glitch. But the fear didn't fade. It settled. That night, I prayed. Not formally, not confidently, just honestly. God, I don't know what's happening, but if you're trying to warn me, please help me understand. Nothing answered. No voice, no vision, no comfort. Just the same heavy silence. Over the next few weeks, the dreams intensified. I saw 3 distinct moments of darkness. Not metaphorical, not emotional. Physical. Total. In the first, lights went out suddenly and panic erupted instantly. In the second, people turned on each other. In the third, there were bodies everywhere. And the silence was worse than the screams. Every time I woke up, my heart was racing, my throat dry, my sheets soaked with sweat. I stopped watching the news entirely. It didn't help. The feeling followed me anyway. At work, I started noticing how fragile life truly was, how hospitals depended entirely on power, how machines kept people alive, how even a short outage caused chaos. I overheard a doctor say, half-jokingly, if the generators ever failed, we'd lose half the ICU in an hour. Everyone laughed. I felt sick. I wanted to say something, to warn them, to ask, what if it happens longer than an hour? But I stayed silent, because silence felt safer than sounding crazy. Then came the final sign, the one I still regret ignoring. 2 nights before my death, I was woken abruptly at 2:44 a.m., wide awake. No dream, no noise, just a sudden certainty that I needed to get out of bed. I walked into my living room and stood there in the dark, feeling something I can only describe as expectation. My phone buzzed. A message from a number I didn't recognize. It contained only 4 words. Prepare. Darkness comes in 3s. I stared at the screen, frozen. When I tried to reply, the message disappeared. The number no longer existed. I didn't sleep again that night. The next day, I told myself I was overreacting. That stress was playing tricks on me. That if something truly catastrophic were coming, someone important would warn the public. Not someone like me. I went about my day as usual. Paid bills, answered emails, smiled when required. But inside, my soul was screaming. Please pause and write this in the comments. Have you ever ignored a warning because it didn't make logical sense at the time? Because ignoring warnings doesn't make them disappear. It just delays understanding. The day of my death arrived quietly. No alarms, no sirens, no sense of finality. And that's what made it so devastating. The day of my death. When everything stopped suddenly. The day I died did not feel important. That is the detail that haunts me the most. There was no sense of destiny in the air. No dramatic intuition. No final goodbye that felt meaningful in the moment. It was just another weekday morning, gray and cold, the kind that blends into all the others. I woke up already tired. Not the kind of tired sleep fixes, the kind that settles in your bones. I stood in the shower longer than usual, letting the hot water run, trying to calm a strange tightness in my chest. I remember thinking, why do I feel like I'm late for something I don't understand? I brushed it off. We always do. I fed my dog, checked my phone, glanced at the news headlines I promised myself I wouldn't read. Something about grid vulnerabilities, cyber threats, emergency preparedness drills. I rolled my eyes. Fear sells, I muttered. I grabbed my keys and left the house. The drive to work was uneventful. Traffic moved slowly. People sat in their cars, staring at phones, lost in their own private worries. The sky was low and heavy, like it might snow but never quite decided to. At a red light, I felt it again. That pressure. That invisible hand tightening around my chest. A thought passed through my mind, uninvited and unsettling. If you don't make it home tonight, will anyone be ready for what's coming? My heart started racing. I shook my head hard, almost angry at myself. "Stop," I said out loud. "You're being ridiculous." The light turned green. I drove on. 10 minutes later, everything ended. I never heard the truck. One moment I was driving. The next, there was an explosion of sound. Metal tearing, glass shattering, my body snapping forward with a force so violent it stole the air from my lungs. Pain came instantly, white hot, crushing, everywhere. My chest slammed against the steering wheel. My head struck the side window. I tasted blood. The world spun violently, then blurred. I tried to breathe. I couldn't. Panic surged as my body refused to obey. My vision narrowed, darkening at the edges. Sounds became distant, muffled, like I was underwater. I remember thinking, very clearly, this isn't supposed to happen. Another thought followed, quieter but heavier. I'm dying. Fear unlike anything I had ever known washed over me. Not fear of pain, but fear of finality. The sudden understanding that I had no control left. I wanted to pray. I didn't know how. My hands went numb. My legs disappeared from my awareness. The pressure in my chest intensified until it felt like my ribs were collapsing inward. Sirens wailed somewhere far away. Then, something strange happened. The pain stopped. Not gradually. Instantly. One moment, agony consumed everything. The next, it was gone, as if a switch had been flipped. I felt light, not relieved, separate. The noise of the world faded rapidly, like someone turning down a volume knob. The fear dissolved with it. My thoughts slowed, then sharpened. I realized I was no longer inside my body. I was above it. I looked down and saw twisted metal, flashing lights, strangers running toward the wreckage. And there, pinned inside the car, was my body. Still, broken, unmoving. The realization should have terrified me. It didn't. I felt calm, unnaturally calm, detached, curious. I watched paramedics work frantically, shouting numbers and instructions. One of them pressed hard on my chest. Another shook his head slightly just for a moment. I understood what that meant. You're gone. Yet I was still thinking, still aware, still me. I tried to speak to them, tried to tell them I was right there, tried to scream that I wasn't afraid anymore. Nothing happened. That's when it hit me fully. I was dead. And instead of terror, a deep peace washed over me. The chaos below began to blur. The scene faded, as if it no longer mattered. I felt myself being pulled upward, not violently, not forcefully, gently, irresistibly. The world I had known my entire life slipped away. Please stop and write this in the comments. Do you believe consciousness continues after death? Because what happened next was more real than anything I had ever experienced on Earth. As I moved away from the scene, something else happened. I felt every fear I had ever carried dissolve, every regret, every shame, every unanswered question. They didn't matter anymore. Time itself seemed to lose meaning. There was no urgency, no ticking clock, just awareness expanding beyond anything I could explain. And then I felt it, a presence, not behind me, not in front of me, around me. It wasn't threatening. It wasn't overwhelming. It was familiar in a way I had never felt before, like being recognized at the deepest level of existence. I wasn't alone, and for the first time in my life, I felt completely safe. I wanted to stay there, whatever there was, but something inside me understood. This was only the beginning. Please write one word in the comments that describes how this chapter made you feel, because the next chapter is where fear disappears completely and the truth begins. The exact moment of death, leaving the body behind. The moment I understood I was dead, something inside me loosened, not snapped, not broke, released. It felt like unfastening a heavy coat I had worn my entire life without realizing how tight it was. The weight I carried as a human, worry, fear, regret, expectation, fell away all at once. I hovered above the scene, aware but no longer attached. Below me, the accident continued without me. Paramedics worked with urgency that no longer felt personal. Their voices sounded distant, distorted, like echoes from another room. The flashing lights seemed dimmer now, less important. I realized something unsettling. The world did not stop when I died. Traffic moved, people stared, phones recorded, sirens wailed. Life continued, without me. That truth should have terrified me. Instead, it clarified everything. I understood in a single instant how temporary everything I had obsessed over truly was. Bills, deadlines, arguments, worries about the future. All of it suddenly felt small, like children fighting over toys while the house burns down. I felt no anger, no sadness, only understanding. As I drifted higher, the sounds of Earth faded completely. The air around me felt different, alive, aware, responsive. It wasn't empty space. It felt intentional. Then something remarkable happened. I became aware of myself without a body. I had no hands, yet I knew I existed. No lungs, yet I felt full. No eyes, yet I saw more clearly than ever. My thoughts weren't fragmented anymore. There was no inner conflict, no second guessing. Everything I understood felt immediate and complete. I realized this was what clarity felt like, and it was overwhelming. Memories from my life rose up, not as painful flashes, but as lessons. Moments I had been ashamed of appeared without judgment. Times I had hurt others surfaced without condemnation. I understood why things happened the way they did. I saw patterns I had missed, consequences I hadn't considered, love I had overlooked, and not once did I feel accused, only taught. Please pause and write this in the comments. Do you believe we understand our lives more clearly after death? Because clarity was only beginning. As I continued to move away from the physical world, I noticed something else. I was not alone. Other presences surrounded me, not clearly defined, not distracting, but unmistakably there. They felt aware, calm, purposeful. I didn't feel watched. I felt accompanied. One presence in particular drew closer, not abruptly, not forcefully. Its approach felt respectful, patient, filled with familiarity. I didn't see a face yet, but my soul reacted instantly. I felt recognized, known, understood completely, every thought, every motive, every doubt, and still, accepted. That realization broke something inside me. I had spent my entire life trying to be enough, trying to appear composed, competent, stable, trying to hide uncertainty and fear. None of that mattered here. I didn't need to explain myself. I didn't need to defend my choices. The presence knew me better than I knew myself. I wanted to speak, not with words, with truth, and somehow, communication happened. Not through sound, but through shared understanding. I understood that my death was not an accident in the way humans define accidents. It wasn't random. It wasn't cruel. It was permitted. Not caused, but allowed. That distinction mattered. I was not taken prematurely. I was interrupted. Interrupted to be shown something I had asked to understand. Weeks earlier, I had prayed, quietly and without expectation. If you're real, show me what's happening. And now I knew. God answers honest questions, just not always gently. Please write honestly in the comments. Do you believe God answers prayers in ways we don't expect? Because I was about to see the answer fully. The space around me began to shift, not physically, but perceptually. The darkness I expected never came. Instead, there was a deep, enveloping peace, a calm so profound it felt like it had existed forever and always would. Fear was impossible here, not because I was brave, because fear had no substance in this place. I felt warmth, not heat, but comfort, a sense of being held without arms, supported without pressure. And then I realized something that shook me deeply. I didn't want to go back. The thought arose naturally, without guilt or resistance. Earth felt distant, heavy, loud. This place felt true. I felt whole. For the first time in my existence, I was not bracing for disappointment, not anticipating loss, not preparing for pain. I simply was. That's when I sensed urgency. Not panic, but purpose. A subtle tension entered the peace, like the calm before someone speaks an important truth. I knew something was coming, something serious, something I needed to see. The presence near me felt closer now, still unseen, but unmistakable. And then, without sound but with absolute certainty, a message formed in my awareness. You have not come here to stay. I felt resistance immediately. No, I tried to respond. I don't want to go back. There was no rebuke, only compassion. And then another understanding came, heavier than the last. You are here to be shown. Please write this word in the comments if it resonates. Purpose. Because purpose is often revealed only after comfort is removed. The peace did not disappear, but it tightened, focused, like silence before a storm, not of destruction, but of revelation. I sensed images forming, not memories, not dreams, visions, and I understood instinctively. What I was about to see would change me forever. The presence that surrounded me was no longer just comforting. It was authoritative, loving, but urgent. And I knew, without being told, exactly who stood with me. Jesus. I hadn't seen his face yet, but my soul recognized him instantly. Before moving on, please write this in the comments. Do you believe Jesus still reveals truth to people today? Because what he revealed next was not about comfort. It was about darkness. The peace beyond fear, standing in the presence of Jesus. The moment I became fully aware that it was Jesus standing with me, the peace deepened. It didn't intensify like a rush. It settled, like something ancient finally returning to its rightful place. I didn't see him immediately with human eyes. There was no sudden image, no dramatic reveal. Instead, his presence defined the space itself. Everything felt ordered around him. Calm, balanced, purposeful. And yet, there was urgency. Not frantic urgency, moral urgency. The kind that carries weight because time matters. I felt exposed in a way that was not humiliating, but honest. Every version of myself I had ever been, fearful, doubtful, hopeful, broken, stood fully known before him, and I was not rejected. That realization broke me more deeply than any pain I had known in life. I expected disappointment. I expected judgment. I expected to feel small. Instead, I felt understood. Jesus communicated without sound, but his words were unmistakable. You searched for truth quietly. You did not know how to ask loudly. I felt tears, not physical tears, but something like them, flow through my awareness. I wasn't faithful enough, I tried to say. I doubted. I hesitated. I stayed silent. And immediately I understood his response. You were honest. That mattered. That sentence alone rewrote my understanding of faith. Faith, I realized, was not performance. It was orientation, where your heart turns when certainty fails. I sensed his gaze, not piercing, not intimidating, but steady. He looked at me the way a teacher looks at a student who is about to be entrusted with something serious. Then the peace shifted. It didn't leave, but it made room for gravity. Jesus showed me his sorrow, not personal sorrow, global sorrow. I felt his grief for humanity, not as frustration, but as heartbreak, a grief born of watching people walk willingly into danger while believing they were safe. He said, "They mistake light for noise and silence for peace." I didn't fully understand yet, but I would. Please pause and write this in the comments. Do you believe humanity confuses comfort with safety? Because what he revealed next answered that question. The space around us expanded, not outward, but inward. It was as if layers of reality peeled back. I became aware of Earth again, not as a planet, but as a living system, fragile, interconnected, strained. Jesus did not show me destruction immediately. He showed me dependence. I saw cities glowing at night, not with life, but with electricity. Power grids pulsing like veins, data flowing constantly, systems stacked on top of systems, all assuming continuity. He impressed this truth into me. What they depend on most, they protect least. That sentence terrified me. I saw how thin the margin really was, how modern life balanced on assumptions, how quickly order could dissolve without warning. Then Jesus said something that made my spirit recoil. Darkness will come, not once, but in sequence. I felt my awareness tighten. Darkness? I asked. And then he clarified, not gently but clearly. Not metaphor, not emotion. Absence of light, absence of power, absence of order. Images began forming, not like dreams, but like windows opening. I saw the first blackout, sudden, widespread, unexpected. People thought it was temporary. I saw confusion, but not panic yet. Traffic lights out, phones dying, news anchors speculating, authorities reassuring. Jesus allowed me to feel the false calm of that moment, hope rooted in assumption. Then he showed me the second blackout. Longer, broader, deadlier. Generators failed. Fuel ran out. Hospitals overwhelmed. Water systems collapsed. Refrigeration stopped. Communication vanished. I felt fear then. Real fear. People didn't know where to go or who to trust. Darkness became physical and psychological. Violence erupted. Not everywhere, but enough. Jesus said quietly, "This is when many realize they prepared only for convenience, not survival." Please write honestly in the comments. Do you think society could function without electricity for weeks? Because the third blackout was the worst. But before showing it to me, Jesus paused. He let me feel his reluctance. This wasn't information shared casually. This was warning shared with pain. He said, "The third darkness is not only absence of power, it is absence of restraint." I felt dread wash through me. Then I saw it. Total collapse. No coordination. No leadership. No systems left to lean on. People turned inward, or against each other. Millions died. Not instantly, gradually. From dehydration, from exposure, from violence, from untreated illness, and from panic. I felt sick. Why? I asked. Why so many? Jesus answered with a truth that cut deeply. Because they believed systems would save them. That sentence echoed endlessly. Please write this in the comments. Do you rely more on systems or on faith? Because I understood then. This wasn't punishment. It was exposure. Exposure of dependency. Exposure of fragility. Exposure of where trust had been misplaced. Jesus showed me something else. Something hopeful. I saw people who survived not because they were strongest, but because they were prepared differently. They were calm, grounded, disciplined, spiritually awake. They didn't panic when darkness came. They adapted. They helped others. They prayed, not as ritual, but as instinct. Jesus said, "Those who know where their light comes from are not overcome by darkness." That truth settled into me like fire. I realized the warning was not meant to terrify. It was meant to separate awareness from ignorance, preparation from assumption, faith from habit. I felt overwhelmed. "I can't carry this," I told him. "People won't listen." Jesus answered simply, "Some will." And then he said something that still echoes in me every day. "Warn them not to fear darkness, but to fear being unprepared." Please stop and write this in the comments. Do you think warnings are acts of fear or acts of love? Because love does not stay silent when danger approaches. The visions began to slow. The images faded, but the urgency did not. I felt a shift again, a pull, not away from him, but back toward my body, back toward pain, back toward responsibility. And I knew what was coming next would be harder than seeing darkness. I would have to return. You must see the darkness clearly. The first blackout begins. Jesus did not rush this part. Before showing me the first blackout in full, he let me feel the world as it was just before it happened. Life continued. People planned weekends. Businesses chased profits. Governments debated. Families argued about small things. Normalcy. That was the most dangerous part. Jesus said, "The first darkness arrives when confidence is highest." And suddenly, the vision shifted. I was standing above a city, one I recognized, but not by name. It could have been anywhere. That was the point. Skyscrapers glowed, traffic flowed, homes hummed with electricity, screens flickered everywhere. Then, without warning, it stopped. Not gradually, not predictably, instantly. Lights snapped off like a switch had been thrown across the sky. Streetlights died mid-glow. Elevators froze between floors. Trains screeched to a halt. Planes diverted in confusion. Silence followed. A strange, unnatural silence. People laughed at first. I saw phones held up, flashlights clicked on, texts sent jokingly, "Power's out, LOL." Restaurants handed out candles. News anchors smiled nervously and spoke of temporary outages. Jesus allowed me to feel the mood. It wasn't fear, it was confidence. Confidence that someone else would fix it. Confidence that backups would kick in. Confidence that order would restore itself quickly. He said quietly, "This is the most dangerous emotion during crisis." Hours passed. Generators started, but unevenly. Some neighborhoods glowed again. Others remained dark. Gas stations closed. ATMs stopped working. Traffic snarled without signals. Still, people believed. Still, people waited. Still, people assumed. I saw hospitals switch to emergency power. Doctors moved quickly, calmly. Patients reassured. Staff trained for outages followed protocols. But Jesus let me see something most people never consider. Emergency systems are designed for short failures, not prolonged ones. Fuel deliveries were delayed. Digital coordination faltered. Communication between agencies degraded as systems lost synchronization. The outage stretched longer than expected. Then came the first cracks. People grew irritated. Tempers flared. Arguments started in grocery stores over remaining supplies. Shelves emptied faster than expected. Not from greed, but from fear quietly arriving. Jesus said, "When light disappears, patience is the first casualty." Night fell, and with it, panic. Darkness is different when it's total. No glow on the horizon, no hum of power, no distant reassurance of civilization working in the background. I felt the fear people felt when they realized, this isn't normal. Emergency broadcasts went silent. Cell towers failed as backups drained. Internet vanished. People stood in the dark, staring at dead screens, waiting, praying, or denying. Jesus showed me accidents multiply. Fires started by candles, generators misused indoors, vehicles crashing at unlit intersections. Sirens echoed endlessly, stretched thin. Deaths began. Not millions, not yet, but enough to change the mood. The first blackout ended suddenly, just as it began. Lights flickered back on. Power surged. Relief exploded across the city like a wave. People cheered, laughed, posted jokes about surviving the apocalypse. Leaders reassured the public. Experts explained it away. Investigations were promised. Jesus let me feel the collective sigh of relief. And then he said something that chilled me. They will mistake mercy for resolution. Please pause and write this in the comments. Have you ever mistaken relief for safety? Because the first blackout was not meant to destroy. It was meant to warn. Jesus showed me how quickly life returned to normal. How fast lessons were forgotten. How systems were patched, not strengthened. How people prepared for the same thing again, instead of something worse. He said, "Warnings ignored become rehearsals for disaster." I felt frustration rise in me. "Why don't they learn?" I asked. Jesus answered with sorrow, "Because inconvenience feels like injustice." The vision shifted again. I saw meetings held behind closed doors, officials arguing quietly, experts disagreeing, no one wanting to cause panic, no one wanting responsibility. Public messaging softened. Reassurance became priority. Preparation was postponed, and life continued, but not unchanged. I noticed something subtle. People trusted less. Neighbors eyed each other more carefully. Businesses installed more security. Prices rose quietly. Supply chains tightened. Anxiety lingered. Jesus said, "Fear rarely leaves completely once invited." I saw some people respond differently. A few bought supplies, not obsessively, but thoughtfully. Others learned old skills. Some turned to prayer, not performatively, but sincerely. They felt the warning. They listened. But most didn't. Most returned to distraction. Please write honestly in the comments. If the power went out for a week tomorrow, would you be ready? Because the first blackout was only the beginning. Jesus showed me how conversations changed afterward. "Next time," people said. "If it happens again," they said. But they still assumed control. That assumption would be deadly. Before the vision moved on, Jesus let me feel something important. Hope. He showed me that even during the first blackout, lives were saved by kindness, by cooperation, by calm leadership in small places. Light existed even in darkness, but it required choice. He said, "Darkness reveals character faster than comfort ever could." That truth settled into me. I understood now why he had shown me the first blackout separately. It wasn't about scale. It was about reaction. How people respond to small warnings determines how they survive larger ones. Then the atmosphere changed again. He didn't speak immediately. The silence felt heavier this time. I sensed what was coming next would not allow laughter or denial. Jesus finally said, "The second darkness will not end quickly." My spirit tightened. The images forming now were darker, longer, more violent. And I knew, without being told, the first blackout was mercy. The second would be consequence. Before continuing, please write this in the comments. Do you believe warnings are given so we can change outcomes? Because the next chapter shows what happens when warnings are ignored. The second blackout. When darkness turns deadly, Jesus did not soften what he showed me next. The second blackout did not arrive with surprise. It arrived with denial. People remembered the first darkness, but they remembered it incorrectly. They remembered the relief at the end, not the vulnerability during it. They remembered the jokes, not the lessons. And so when systems began to fail again, the response was slower, more skeptical, more arrogant. The vision placed me inside a city during the early hours of the second blackout. At first, it looked similar. Lights flickering, power dipping, brief outages rolling through neighborhoods. Authorities assured the public it was manageable. That word again, manageable. Jesus said quietly, "Familiar danger is the most underestimated." This time, the darkness didn't fall everywhere at once. It spread, region by region, grid by grid, like a sickness moving through a body already weakened. Power stations shut down to prevent damage. Data centers went offline, communication fractured. Some areas had power, others were plunged into silence. The unevenness made it worse. People tried to move toward places with light, crowding cities, hospitals, shelters. Roads clogged, fuel ran out, vehicles were abandoned where they stopped. I felt the anxiety building, not panic yet, but confusion. Hospitals were overwhelmed within hours. Backup generators kicked in, but fuel logistics failed quickly. Deliveries couldn't coordinate without communication. Some generators malfunctioned, others were never tested under this kind of load. I watched doctors make impossible decisions. Who gets oxygen? Who gets medication? Who waits? Some patients died quietly in the dark. Others didn't. Jesus let me feel the moral weight of those moments. The second blackout lasted longer than the first. Days, not hours. Food spoiled. Water pressure dropped. Sewage systems backed up. Pharmacies were emptied. Insulin ran out. Dialysis machines stopped. I saw elderly people dying in apartments with no one checking on them. I saw parents trying to keep children calm while fear leaked through their voices. I saw people rationing candlelight like it was gold. And then something shifted. Fear hardened. The darkness didn't just remove light, it removed restraint. Jesus said, When people believe help is not coming, they redefine what is acceptable. Looting began. Not everywhere, but enough. At first it was food, water, batteries. Then it became weapons, territory, control. I saw neighborhoods form barricades, armed groups patrol streets. Rumors spread faster than facts ever had. No one knew what was true. And in darkness, imagination is cruel. I felt the collective psychology fracture. People didn't trust announcements anymore. They didn't trust neighbors. They didn't trust anyone who knocked at the door. Jesus showed me how quickly humanity regresses when survival feels threatened. Civilization is a thin layer, he said. Darkness peels it back. Deaths multiplied, not instantly, cumulatively, from dehydration, from untreated infections, from exposure, from violence born of fear. Millions didn't die at once. They faded, one home at a time, one street at a time, one hospital at a time. Please pause and write this in the comments. Do you think society is emotionally prepared for prolonged darkness? Because emotional readiness mattered as much as physical preparation. Jesus showed me something else, something harder to watch. I saw people praying who had never prayed before. I saw people bargaining. I saw people blaming God. And I saw others turn inward, calm, grounded, steady. They weren't the loudest. They weren't the strongest. They were the prepared spiritually, prepared mentally, prepared to lead calmly instead of panicking loudly. Those people became anchors in the chaos. I saw them share food without expectation, offer shelter without demands, speak truth without shouting. They didn't deny danger. They refused hysteria. Jesus said, "Faith does not eliminate darkness. It teaches you how to move within it." The second blackout eventually ended. Not everywhere, not evenly, but enough to restore partial order. Power returned in waves. Communications flickered back. Governments announced stabilization. People cried with relief. But the damage remained. Entire regions were traumatized. Infrastructure weakened. Trust shattered. And the death toll, never fully acknowledged, was already staggering. I felt the world exhale. And then Jesus said something that froze me. They will believe the worst is over. Please write honestly in the comments. Have you ever relaxed too soon after surviving something difficult? Because survival created false confidence. People demanded explanations. Leaders offered reassurances. Experts argued publicly. Privately, fear ruled. Systems were patched again. Not rebuilt. Not hardened. Patched. Jesus showed me preparations made for the same event, not the next one. Backup generators refueled. Emergency plans updated. But spiritual blindness remained. The assumption that we survived, so we will again, became doctrine. That assumption would cost millions more lives. I asked Jesus, my voice trembling, "Why don't they change?" His answer was heavy. Because change requires humility, and fear alone does not create it. Then he showed me the third darkness forming, not as an event, but as inevitability. The world was now weaker, resources depleted, people exhausted, trust eroded, and worst of all, confidence replaced caution. Jesus said, "The third darkness comes when people believe they are ready." I felt dread unlike anything before. The second blackout was deadly, but it still had endurance. The third would have finality. Please stop and write this in the comments. Do you think surviving once guarantees survival again? Because the third darkness would answer that question brutally. Before the vision moved forward, Jesus allowed me to feel something unexpected. Compassion. For everyone. The prepared and unprepared alike. He was not angry. He was grieving. "I warned them," he said softly. "Not to punish, but to spare." That sentence broke me. I understood now. Warnings are not threats. They are acts of mercy extended before consequences arrive. The second blackout ended with relief. The third would not. And as the images began to darken again, I knew what came next would make everything before it look merciful. The third blackout. When millions die in the dark, Jesus hesitated before showing me the third blackout. That alone terrified me. Until that moment, everything he had shown, though devastating, had carried pauses, chances, margins for recovery. This time felt different. The atmosphere around us grew heavy, like the stillness before something irreversible. He said softly, "This is where preparation ends and consequences begin." The vision opened not with darkness, but with false readiness. I saw communities holding meetings, governments presenting plans, media repeating phrases like lessons learned and improved resilience. People believed they were ready now. They weren't. The third blackout did not strike suddenly. It cascaded. One failure triggered another. A backup relied on a backup that relied on a system already weakened by the previous outages. What had been patched finally tore. And when the lights went out this time, they did not come back. Not in hours, not in days, not in weeks. I felt the darkness settle, not just physically, but psychologically. There was no expectation of rescue, no assumption of restoration. People sensed it almost immediately. This is different. Communication vanished completely. Satellites failed. Emergency broadcasts went silent. Entire regions were cut off from the world and from each other. I watched cities go dark, one by one, until even the horizon held no glow. Jesus let me feel the terror of total isolation. People were alone with their fear. Hospitals shut down within days. Generators failed without fuel. Life support machines stopped. Neonatal units went silent. Surgeries ended mid-procedure. I saw doctors weeping as they held patients they could no longer help. Millions died quietly. Not in explosions, in beds, in hallways, in homes. Jesus showed me water systems collapsing next. Pumps failed. Treatment plants shut down. Clean water vanished. Disease followed quickly. Then came hunger. Food distribution depended on systems that no longer existed. Refrigeration failed. Supply chains dissolved entirely. What people had stored was never enough for this length of time. I saw parents giving their last food to children. I saw elderly people choosing not to eat. I saw desperation turn people into strangers to themselves. Please pause and write this in the comments. Do you believe modern society could survive months without power? Because the answer, I learned, was devastating. Violence became widespread, not because people were evil, but because hope disappeared. When the future collapses, morality struggles to stand. I saw groups seize control of resources. I saw others flee into darkness with nowhere to go. I saw fires burn unchecked, consuming entire blocks. And I saw silence. Entire cities silent. Jesus let me feel the scale. Millions died, not all at once, but relentlessly. Every hour added thousands more. Not counted, not acknowledged, just gone. I fell to my knees, though I had no body. Please, I begged, make it stop. Jesus' response was not harsh, it was broken. This is what happens when humanity builds life on what cannot endure. Then he showed me something crucial. Not everyone perished. Those who survived were not the richest, not the strongest, not the most armed. They were the most anchored, spiritually, mentally, relationally. I saw small communities that stayed together. People who planned, rationed, shared. People who didn't wait for systems to save them, but adapted calmly. Most importantly, I saw people who did not panic. Fear killed as many as darkness. Jesus said, "Panic is more deadly than hunger." I watched people who prepared spiritually move through the darkness with clarity. They grieved, but they functioned. They prayed, not as ritual, but as survival. They remembered who they were. They remembered what mattered. In the deepest darkness, they became light. Please write this in the comments. Do you believe inner strength matters more than external comfort? Because it did. Jesus showed me the end of the third blackout, not as restoration, but as aftermath. The world that emerged was not the world that entered. Populations were reduced, borders meaningless, power redefined. Those who survived were changed, humbled, quieter, more aware. He said, This darkness is not the end of humanity. It is the end of illusion. I understood then. The 3 blackouts were not random disasters. They were exposures. The first exposed complacency. The second exposed fragility. The third exposed dependence. And millions paid the price for believing technology was salvation. I asked the question that burned inside me. Why show me this? Jesus answered without hesitation. Because warnings heard can become preparation. That truth struck me deeply. The future was not fixed, but outcomes depended on response. He showed me 2 paths diverging after the vision ended. One where people mocked warnings, chased comfort, and trusted systems blindly. Another where people prepared wisely, strengthened communities, and grounded themselves spiritually. Both paths existed. Choice mattered. Please stop and write this in the comments. Do you believe humanity still has time to choose a different path? Because time, though short, still existed. The darkness began to recede from my vision, but the weight of it remained. Jesus' final words about the blackouts echoed louder than anything else he had said. Darkness does not kill the prepared. It reveals the unprepared. I felt myself being pulled away again, back toward my body, back toward pain, back toward a world that had not yet seen what I had seen. And I knew what came next would be just as difficult as witnessing millions die. I would have to return and warn why millions died during the blackouts. The truth people don't want to hear. When the images of the 3rd blackout faded, I thought the worst was over. I was wrong. What came next wasn't another vision of destruction. It was explanation. And somehow, that was harder to endure. Jesus turned his attention fully to me. The darkness around us remained, but his presence was steady, unshaken. I felt his sorrow more clearly now. Not anger, not condemnation. Grief. Grief for what could have been avoided. He said, "They will say millions died because of darkness. But darkness is not the cause." That sentence startled me. If not darkness, I asked, then what? And then he showed me the truth people don't want to face. The first reason millions die is dependence without redundancy. Jesus showed me how modern life is built on fragile chains. Electricity feeds water. Water feeds hospitals. Hospitals feed life. Break one link, and everything downstream collapses. People assumed systems would always work. They planned convenience, not failure. They stored entertainment, not essentials. They optimized comfort, not resilience. Jesus said, they prepared for ease, not endurance. I saw families with homes full of devices, but no water. Cities full of restaurants, but no food supply. Hospitals full of machines, but no power beyond days. Darkness didn't kill them. Unprepared dependence did. Please pause and write this in the comments. Do you think modern life has made people more dependent or more resilient? The second reason millions die is panic without leadership. Jesus showed me crowds reacting instead of thinking, people fleeing without destination, hoarding without plan, fighting without purpose. Panic spread faster than hunger. He explained, fear collapses judgment, darkness only reveals it. Those who panicked made fatal decisions, drinking unsafe water, burning fuel improperly, attacking others out of suspicion. I saw how quickly fear stripped people of empathy, but I also saw the contrast. Where calm leaders emerged, quiet, grounded individuals, survival rates increased dramatically, not because they had more resources, but because they preserved order. Jesus said, leadership is not authority, it is clarity under pressure. Please write honestly in the comments. In a crisis, do you think most people would panic or help? The third reason millions die is isolation without community. Jesus showed me people trapped alone in apartments, homes, and neighborhoods with no relationships, no shared plans, no mutual trust. When darkness came, isolation became lethal. Those alone had no one to check on them, no one to share resources, no one to help when illness or injury struck. I saw entire buildings where residents died one by one, unnoticed. In contrast, I saw small communities survive with far less, but together. They rationed. They rotated watch. They supported the weak. Jesus said, "Community is a survival system humanity abandoned for independence." That truth cut deeply. Please write this in the comments. Do you know your neighbors well enough to survive together? The fourth reason millions die is spiritual emptiness under pressure. This one frightened me most. Jesus showed me people who had no inner anchor. When darkness erased routine, distraction, and entertainment, they were left alone with themselves, and they couldn't endure it. Despair spread. Some gave up eating, some stopped trying, some chose death over endurance. Jesus said softly, "A soul without hope cannot carry a body for long." This wasn't judgment. It was reality. Those who had faith, real faith, not borrowed language, endured far more. Even when resources were low, they found meaning. Even when fear was present, they had direction. Faith didn't remove danger. It gave reason to survive it. Please stop and write this in the comments. Do you think hope is as essential as food in a crisis? The fifth reason millions die is delayed humility. Jesus showed me how long people waited to accept reality, how they clung to normalcy until it was gone, how they trusted reassurances long after evidence contradicted them. Pride delayed adaptation. Pride delayed cooperation. Pride delayed repentance. Jesus said, "Humility early saves lives. Humility late mourns them." I felt that truth settle heavily in me. Then he showed me something even more sobering. Many of the deaths occurred after people could have adapted, not immediately, but later, because they refused to change how they lived, refused to listen, refused to prepare. Darkness didn't steal their future, stubbornness did. Please write this honestly in the comments. Do you think people listen to warnings or dismiss them? I was overwhelmed. How do I tell people this? I asked. They won't want to hear it. Jesus replied with a firmness that carried compassion. Truth that comforts is rarely remembered. Truth that disturbs can save. That sentence changed me. I understood now. This message wasn't about fear. It was about responsibility. Responsibility to prepare wisely. Responsibility to build community. Responsibility to strengthen faith before crisis demands it. Jesus showed me one final comparison. Two households. One had less supplies, but strong relationships, discipline, and prayer. The other had more supplies, but fear, isolation, and chaos. The first survived longer, often entirely. The second collapsed quickly. He said, "Survival is not about what you store. It is about what you are." That truth burned into me. The reason millions die is not mystery. It is misplaced trust. Trust in systems over people. Trust in comfort over character. Trust in technology over truth. And that trust shatters in the dark. Please pause and write this in the comments. What do you trust most right now? Because what you trust will determine how you respond when everything else disappears. The explanation ended, but the weight remained. I knew now why Jesus had shown me the blackouts. Not to scare me, but to send me back with clarity. Darkness is survivable, but only for those willing to prepare beyond convenience. And I understood something else, something that terrified me more than the visions themselves. Most people would hear this and do nothing. The silence after his explanation felt heavy. Then Jesus said something that signaled the next phase. Now you must understand what the darkness truly means. And I knew. The next chapter would move beyond physical survival, into spiritual meaning. The spiritual meaning of the 3 days and nights of darkness. When Jesus said the words, "You must understand what the darkness truly means," I felt a shift deeper than anything before. This was no longer about power grids, food shortages, or survival strategies. This was about the soul of humanity. The space around us grew quieter, not empty, but focused. The images of cities and suffering receded, replaced by something more intimate and far more unsettling. Jesus said, "The darkness is not only an event, it is a mirror." I didn't understand at first, so he showed me. I saw humanity as a whole, not as nations or crowds, but as hearts. Millions of inner worlds, each carrying beliefs, fears, hopes, and idols. And I saw how much noise filled them. constant distraction, constant stimulation, constant escape. Jesus explained, "Light has hidden many things. Darkness reveals them." The first spiritual meaning of the darkness was exposure. When external light disappears, internal light is tested. I saw people stripped of routines, entertainment, and identity markers. Without jobs, titles, and digital validation, many no longer knew who they were. Some collapsed inward. Others finally looked upward. Darkness removed illusion. Please pause and write this in the comments. Do you think silence would strengthen you or scare you? Because silence was coming. Jesus showed me that the 3 days and nights of darkness functioned like layers. The first stripped comfort. The second stripped control. The third stripped identity. What remained was truth. Not everyone was ready for that. The second spiritual meaning was separation. Not physical separation, spiritual alignment. Jesus showed me how darkness clarified allegiance. People who spoke the same words during peace revealed opposite hearts during crisis. Some chose compassion. Others chose survival at any cost. Darkness did not create evil. It revealed it. Jesus said, "Pressure does not change hearts. It unmasks them." I felt that truth deeply. In the vision, I saw people who had spoken of love turn cruel when afraid. And I saw quiet individuals become heroic when no one was watching. Darkness reordered value systems. What people truly worshipped, comfort, control, self, or God, became obvious. Please write this honestly in the comments. What do you think people truly worship today? The third spiritual meaning was judgment, not condemnation, but consequence. Jesus was very clear about this. He said, "Judgment is not always punishment. Often it is permission. Permission for people to experience the result of what they have chosen. Humanity had chosen speed over wisdom, convenience over resilience, distraction over discernment. Darkness allowed those choices to mature, and they bore bitter fruit. This was not God abandoning humanity. It was humanity discovering what life looks like without Him at the center. I saw how many people blamed God during the darkness. "Why did you allow this?" they cried. And Jesus' response was gentle but firm. "I warned, I waited, I invited." That broke me. The fourth spiritual meaning was invitation. Even in the deepest darkness, Jesus showed me open doors. People praying who never prayed before. People repenting without audience. People forgiving old wounds because pride no longer mattered. Darkness humbled many hearts, and humility opened them. Jesus said, "When all false lights fail, some finally see me clearly." That truth filled me with unexpected hope. Darkness was not only loss, it was awakening. But awakening came with cost. The fifth spiritual meaning was urgency. Jesus showed me how time felt different during the darkness. Decisions carried more weight. Delay became deadly, not only physically, but spiritually. Neutrality vanished. People could no longer hide behind busyness or ambiguity. Jesus said, "In darkness, silence becomes a decision." That sentence echoed loudly. Please write this in the comments. Do you believe staying neutral is a choice? Because it was. I asked Jesus the question burning in my heart. Is this like the 3 days of darkness spoken of before? He did not argue theology. He answered with essence. Patterns repeat when lessons are ignored. That chilled me. He showed me that the 3 days and nights of darkness were not about numbers on a calendar, but about completion. A full cycle. An ending of one way of living. A beginning of another. Those who survived spiritually were not untouched. They were transformed, humbled, grounded, clear. Jesus said, "Those who emerge will no longer confuse faith with comfort." I realized then why this message mattered so much. The darkness was not just something to endure. It was something that redefined humanity. It separated borrowed belief from lived faith, inherited values from chosen conviction. I felt overwhelmed. How do I tell people this? I asked again. They'll focus on fear. Jesus responded with calm certainty. Speak truth. Let hearts decide how to hear it. That was my responsibility. Not reaction. not acceptance. Truth. He showed me something final in this chapter of the vision. I saw two people standing in the same darkness. One panicked, the other prayed. The darkness was identical. The outcome was not. Jesus said, "Darkness tests what light could not." I understood now. The 3 days and nights of darkness were not just warnings of death. They were reveals of life. What kind? What source? What foundation? Please pause and write this in the comments. If everything went dark tonight, what would remain strong in you? Because that question mattered more than any timeline. As this understanding settled into me, the atmosphere changed again. The vision slowed. The intensity softened. But the weight remained. Jesus said, "Now you must see who is protected and why." And I knew the next chapter would challenge assumptions even further. Protection was not where people expected it to be. Who will be protected and who will be in the greatest danger? When Jesus said, "Now you must see who is protected and why," I expected lists, locations, groups, rules. Instead, he showed me patterns. Protection, I learned, was not geographic. It was positional. The vision shifted again, and I saw people in every imaginable setting: cities, suburbs, rural land, apartments, shelters. Darkness covered all of them equally. No place was immune, and yet, outcomes differed. Jesus said, "Protection is not where people stand, it is what they stand on." That sentence reframed everything. He showed me first those who were most at risk, not the poorest, not the weakest, but the most dependent. I saw people with abundance, homes filled with supplies, devices, comforts, yet paralyzed when plans failed. Their danger wasn't lack of resources, it was lack of adaptability. When the blackout outlasted expectations, they froze. When their plan failed, they had no second one. When control slipped, fear took over. Jesus said, "Those who prepare only one way prepare to panic." Please pause and write this in the comments. Do you have more than one way to adapt if your plan fails? Then he showed me another group in danger: the isolated. People who prided themselves on independence, who avoided community, who didn't trust others, who believed needing help was weakness. When darkness came, they had no margin. No one checked on them. No one shared resources. No one noticed when they fell ill. Isolation, I realized, was deadlier than scarcity. Jesus said, "Independence feels strong until weakness arrives." Please write honestly in the comments. Do you face challenges alone or with others? He showed me a third group in danger: the unanchored. These were people without inner direction. When routines vanished, they lost purpose. When entertainment disappeared, they faced silence they couldn't bear. Despair took them faster than hunger. Jesus said softly, "A mind without hope cannot carry a body for long." That truth frightened me. Then he showed me those who were protected, and they didn't look the same. Some had little, some had more, but they shared certain qualities. First, calm under pressure. They didn't deny danger. They refused hysteria. They assessed. They adapted. They conserved energy. Jesus said, "Calm multiplies resources. Panic wastes them." Second, community over control. Protected people were connected. They shared information. They rotated responsibilities. They watched over children and elders. They didn't hoard. They coordinated. Jesus showed me how 5 households working together survived better than 1 household with 10 times the supplies. Please pause and write this in the comments. Do you believe cooperation is more powerful than stockpiling? Third, discipline over comfort. Protected people had practiced restraint before crisis. They were used to waiting, conserving, denying impulse. Darkness didn't shock them into discipline. They already had it. Jesus said, "Comfort weakens endurance, discipline strengthens it." Fourth, and most important, spiritual grounding. Those protected were not fearless. They were anchored. They prayed, not as ritual, but as orientation. They remembered meaning when chaos tried to erase it. They forgave quickly. They refused hatred even when wronged. Their faith didn't remove danger. It removed despair. Jesus said, "Darkness cannot overcome those who know where their light comes from." That sentence filled me with awe. I asked the question everyone asks: will believers automatically be protected? Jesus answered carefully, "Belief spoken is not the same as belief lived." I understood. Protection was not about labels. It was about alignment. People who lived their faith, who practiced humility, discipline, compassion, were resilient. People who treated faith as decoration were shaken. Please write this honestly in the comments. Is your faith something you practice or something you display? Jesus showed me something surprising next. Some people who never used religious language survived remarkably well. They had humility. They had community. They had moral clarity. And some who spoke loudly about faith collapsed quickly because fear ruled them. Jesus said, "I look at fruit, not volume." That humbled me deeply. Then he showed me children. Children who survived often did so because adults around them stayed calm. Fear in adults multiplied fear in children. Protection, I realized, was contagious. So was panic. Jesus said, "The protected become protection for others." I saw people who became leaders accidentally, not because they wanted power, but because they carried peace. Others followed them instinctively. Peace drew people. Clarity guided them. Then Jesus showed me who was in the greatest danger. Those who mocked warnings. Those who delayed preparation endlessly. Those who believed normal would always return. Jesus said, "Delay is a decision." That truth struck hard. The greatest danger wasn't darkness. It was denial. Please pause and write this in the comments. Do you think denial is more dangerous than fear? Finally, Jesus summarized protection in a way I will never forget. Those who survive are not those who avoid darkness, but those who refuse to become it. That sentence ended the vision for this chapter. I understood now. Protection was not promised. It was cultivated by daily choices, by humility, by community, by faith that acts. As the vision began to shift again, Jesus said, "You have seen the darkness. Now you must return." I felt the pull start again, stronger this time, back toward pain, back toward breath, back toward a world that hadn't yet gone dark. And I knew the next part would be the hardest of all. I would wake up. Before we continue, please write this in the comments. What do you think truly protects a person in times of crisis? Because the next chapter is where everything changes. From vision to reality. Returning to the body. Waking up with a warning. The return was not gentle. One moment I was held in clarity, surrounded by meaning, understanding, and purpose. The next, I was slammed back into weight, pain, and noise. My first sensation was pressure. A crushing heaviness in my chest, like air itself had become thick and hostile. My lungs burned as they forced themselves to work again. I gasped violently, choking, coughing, my body convulsing as if it had forgotten how to exist. Sound rushed in all at once. Voices shouting, machines beeping, metal clattering. Someone yelled, "She's breathing!" Another voice, "We've got her back." Back. The word felt wrong. I didn't want to be back. Pain spread everywhere. Sharp, disorienting, relentless. My limbs felt foreign, heavy, disconnected. I tried to move and couldn't. Panic surged until I remembered what I had seen. "This is temporary," I told myself. "You were warned this would happen." My eyes opened under blinding light. Faces hovered above me, distorted by tears and motion. A mask covered my face. Hands restrained me gently as my body fought the sudden return to limitation. I cried, not from pain, but from loss. I had been somewhere real, and now I was here. Please pause and write this in the comments. Do you think returning from death could be harder than dying itself? The days that followed blurred together. Hospital rooms, white walls, monitors, medication that dulled the body but could not touch memory. Doctors explained injuries, timelines, probabilities. Family members cried and thanked God for a miracle. Nurses smiled kindly and told me to rest. I nodded. I smiled when expected. But inside, I was screaming because I remembered everything. Every blackout, every warning, every truth Jesus had shown me. And the weight of that knowledge pressed on me harder than any injury. At night, when the room was quiet, fear crept in. Not fear of what I had seen, but fear of what came next. What if I imagined it? What if it wasn't real? What if no one listens? Then the memories surged back, too vivid, too coherent, too consistent to dismiss. I remembered his words clearly. You will return, and you will warn. I didn't want that responsibility. I wanted peace. I wanted rest. I wanted to forget. But forgetting was impossible. The urgency sat in my chest like a ticking clock. I tried to talk about it once. I whispered to a nurse. I saw Jesus. He showed me something terrible. She smiled softly, adjusted my IV, and said, near-death experiences can feel very real. Try not to stress yourself. I stopped trying. Silence felt safer than disbelief. When I was discharged weeks later, I returned home changed in ways no one could see. Familiar rooms felt foreign. Everyday sounds felt too loud. Normal conversations felt shallow. I couldn't watch the news. I couldn't scroll on my phone. Every headline echoed the visions. Grid vulnerabilities, cyber threats, energy instability. It felt like the world was whispering the same warning I carried inside. Please write honestly in the comments. Have you ever felt a burden of knowledge you couldn't share easily? I tried to go back to my old life. My job, my routine, my distractions. None of it fit anymore. I would sit at my desk, staring at my screen, while images of darkness and cities without light played in my mind. Deadlines felt meaningless when I knew what was coming. One afternoon, overwhelmed, I locked myself in the bathroom and slid down the wall, shaking. Why me? I whispered. I'm not brave. I'm not strong. I'm not a leader. And deep inside, clearer than thought, quieter than sound, I felt the answer. You are willing. That was all. Not qualified, not fearless, not prepared. Willing. Please write this word in the comments if it resonates. Willing. That word changed everything. I began writing at night. Pages and pages, recording every detail before fear could erode memory. I prayed constantly, not eloquently, but desperately. Help me say this right. Help me not distort it. Help whoever needs to hear it find it. Slowly, doors opened. Small ones. A conversation with a friend who went quiet instead of laughing. A stranger who said, I've been feeling this too. A moment when someone listened longer than expected. Not everyone responded well. Some mocked me. Some dismissed me. Some told me I was spreading fear. But a few, just a few, felt it immediately. Their faces changed. They didn't argue. They recognized the urgency. Those moments kept me going. Because this was never about convincing everyone. It was about warning anyone. Please answer this in the comments. Do you think warnings are an act of fear or an act of love? Physically, I healed. Emotionally, I grieved. Spiritually, I burned. I stopped caring about approval. Only obedience mattered. And the closer time moved toward what I had been shown, the louder the urgency became. News events aligned. Infrastructure strained. Division deepened. Every time doubt whispered, I remembered his words. Darkness does not kill the prepared. It reveals the unprepared. That sentence guides me now. Because I didn't come back to be comfortable. I came back to be clear. And clarity demands action. Please pause and write this in the comments. If you knew a crisis was coming, would you warn others, even if they doubted you? Because the mission doesn't end with survival. It begins with responsibility. And the final chapter is where that responsibility turns toward you. The mission to warn. Why you are hearing this now. I didn't choose the timing of this message. That's the first thing you need to understand. I tried to stay quiet. I tried to wait for a better moment. I tried to convince myself that maybe the urgency I felt would fade. It didn't. Instead, it intensified. Every week that passed, the pressure grew heavier. like a hand on my chest reminding me that silence was no longer neutral. The more I watched the world move closer to what I had been shown, the clearer it became. This message is not late. It is on time. And if you are hearing it now, there is a reason. Jesus made this very clear to me. Not everyone will hear. Not everyone needs to. But those who do are being given time. Time is the most misunderstood gift. People think time exists to be filled. In truth, time exists to be used. I was shown that warnings do not come to satisfy curiosity. They come to activate responsibility. If you hear a warning and do nothing, the warning becomes a witness against you. That realization terrified me, because it meant this message wasn't just for survival. It was for decision. Please pause and write this in the comments. Do you believe some messages reach us exactly when we need them? The mission I was given was simple, but not easy. Not to predict dates, not to argue theology, not to chase attention. My mission was to wake people up before darkness removes the option. Jesus showed me how people often misunderstand urgency. They think urgency means panic. It doesn't. Urgency means clarity without delay. He said, "Urgency is love that refuses to wait." That sentence changed how I spoke. I stopped trying to soften the message to make it more acceptable. I stopped worrying about being misunderstood. I focused on being faithful, because faithfulness doesn't ask how many will listen. It asks who might survive because someone spoke. I was shown that many people will hear this and feel uncomfortable, not because it's false, but because it interrupts routine. It challenges assumptions. It threatens comfort. Comfort resists warning. But comfort doesn't survive darkness. Please write honestly in the comments. Does this message comfort you or disturb you? Because disturbance is often the first step toward preparation. Jesus showed me something deeply personal about those who would hear this message. Many of you already feel it. That restlessness, that sense that something is off, that quiet intuition that life is more fragile than it appears. You felt it at night. You felt it watching the news. You felt it when the power flickers or systems fail briefly. You are not imagining it. Jesus said, "I warn the watchful first, not the loudest, not the most confident, the watchful." People who notice patterns, people who feel the tension beneath normalcy, people who sense that reliance on systems without resilience is dangerous. If that describes you, this message is not meant to scare you. It is meant to focus you. Please pause and write this in the comments. Have you felt a growing sense of urgency lately? Because urgency is already doing its work. The mission to warn is not about shouting from rooftops. It's about changing posture, preparing wisely, building community, strengthening faith, reducing dependence on what cannot endure. Jesus never told me to tell people to run. He told me to tell them to stand ready. Ready doesn't mean fearful. Ready means clear-minded. I was shown that many will say, "If it gets bad, I'll prepare then." But darkness punishes delay. By the time crisis is undeniable, options shrink rapidly. Jesus said, "Preparation delayed becomes regret." That truth cuts through excuses. You don't prepare because you are afraid. You prepare because you are responsible. Please write this in the comments. Do you think preparation shows fear or wisdom? Another reason you are hearing this now is because the message spreads through people, not platforms. I was shown that algorithms don't carry truth. People do. This message will not reach everyone, but it will reach those willing to pass it on quietly, thoughtfully, without hysteria. Those who hear and say, "Someone I love needs to hear this." Those who prepare and help others prepare. Those who choose calm leadership over loud denial. Jesus said, "The warned become warnings." That sentence stayed with me. If you hear this and ignore it, nothing changes. If you hear this and prepare, everything can change. Not the darkness itself, but your ability to endure it. The mission is not to stop darkness. It is to outlast it with integrity intact. Please pause and write this in the comments. If a crisis came suddenly, would you lead calmly or panic first? Because leadership begins before anyone asks you to lead. I want to be very clear about something. This message is not saying darkness is unavoidable. It is saying unpreparedness is. Jesus showed me that outcomes are flexible, but only when people respond early. Faith is not passive. Wisdom is not loud. Preparation is not paranoia. It is stewardship of life, of community, of responsibility. The reason you are hearing this now is because there is still space to act. Not later. Now. I was told to say this plainly. Those who prepare quietly now will not panic loudly later. That sentence defines the mission. Please write one word in the comments that describes how this message makes you feel right now. Fear? Urgency? Clarity? Resistance? Hope? There is no wrong answer. Only honest ones. Because honesty is the foundation of preparation. As this chapter ends, I need you to understand something important. You are not being asked to believe everything blindly. You are being asked to pay attention, to observe, to prepare, to strengthen what truly matters.